everybody, Tyrone the God 3 here, and today we're going to be talking about something that is repeated within the course of Dragon Ball Super, but is never really touched up upon, and that being God Ki. So what is God Ki exactly? Well, God Ki essentially is like regular Ki within the course of Dragon Ball Z. However, it has various different aspects that make it a league of all of its own, which would explain why Beerus, during his introduction, both in Battle of Gods and in Dragon Ball Super, was able to easily overpower all of the Z Warriors within his arrival and easily outclass them, and is debatably one of the reasons why characters with God Ki have such a powerful difference between characters that don't. I mean, unless you're watching this season of Dragon Ball Super, where apparently everybody's strong enough to fight off against Goku with God Ki, but regardless, what God Ki essentially is imagine, if you will, a car. Now let's say this car runs on two different fuel sources. First one is gasoline. The second one, let's say, is water. Okay, so it runs on two different types. And the name of the game is which one is more efficient. Well, the thing about this is the fact that not only do characters with God Ki, much like Goku and Vegeta, have access to two separate types of Ki, but they're able to utilize those keys to their largest advantage. Now, what makes God Ki so different from regular Ki? Well, that's probably the most important topic that we need to touch on, and that's the things that you're able to do with God Power. It's already been clear that when Goku turned Super Saiyan God, he was able to do things that he just couldn't do when he was using regular Ki. The name of the game when using regular Ki was to get stronger, to expand it, to preserve it, and things like that. Goku, while he was fighting and against various opponents and villains, was able to use his Ki to use various attacks, techniques, utilize it, pick new forms and transformations that would use up a lot of Ki energy, or he would use transformations that were proficient in saving Ki energy. The most being full-powered Super Saiyan, where Goku was able to utilize that form to a point to where he can stay Super Saiyan without using access Ki. Essentially, when any character uses any energy-based attack or even high-speed movement or flying even to that matter, they essentially use their Ki energy, the energy that's inside them, the fuel source that we all pretty much live on within the world of Dragon Ball Z. Now, when a character has access to God Ki, it's essentially their energy fuel source as well, but it has a bit of different preferences. One of those preferences being the fact that it can't be sensed by anyone except other God Ki users. Essentially, it's probably because people who use God Ki essentially have the aura sensed within their body and can only locate others with the aura that's similar to that. So essentially what it means is if you don't have access to God Ki, then you're unable to sense it, which puts you at a huge disadvantage when fighting someone who has God Ki. Usually when fighting, if you try to detect your opponents or they're moving at high speeds, knowing where they're going to be so that you can counter them or defend yourself by blocking their attacks would be very useful in a fight. However, if you can't sense where they're gonna be, then it automatically puts you at a disadvantage and the character is easily able to overpower you. This could explain why Super Saiyan 3 Goku had such a hard time fighting off against Beerus. It's just simply because Goku couldn't put a lock-in on Beerus' energy, so Beerus was moving so fast to the point where when he did strike Goku, Goku just didn't have his guard up for most of that fight. Another thing that God Ki allows you to do is give you a lot of strength and speed, more so than if you were using regular Ki. This means that you have access to a much faster way of movement, as well as much stronger abilities to fight off against certain opponents. Now, in an anime like Dragon Ball Z that literally starts off the first season with characters able to destroy an entire planet, it's really hard to see these differences take place within the course of the fight, mainly because Z Warriors, and villains for that matter, try their best to control their Ki to the point to where their main focus is defeating their opponent and not the areas around them. If they end up destroying areas around them, then it's just collateral damage, but essentially the goal is to beat the opponent himself. So it's really hard to see it, but there is an increase in power. This was explained even further in Dragon Ball Super when Goku and Beerus had ended up fighting each other, and their climactic battle was so harsh that they ended up ripping apart the dimensions of the universe itself. Literally, the entire dimension of the universe that they were in was beginning to tear apart due to the course of their battle. But other than that, the increase in speed and power definitely make for the characters to be a lot stronger and faster than anyone who's running off regular ki. But what else are the differences? Well, as we can see also in Dragon Ball Super, the God Ki allows the user to heal themselves from battle. We also see this again in Battle of Gods, where Goku ends up getting cut in the face by Beerus when fighting him. There's a huge scar on his face, but it later goes away as the course of the fight goes on. Which means God Ki essentially can pretty much act as a regain, which is used in most RPGs, where every turn or every few minutes that passes, the user of regain ends up healing as time passes. So as Goku's fighting, he's slowly healing, which means you can do as much damage to Goku as you want, but essentially if you can't detect him, he's way stronger, he's way faster, and can heal every second of the fight. You're going to be fighting him for quite a while, assuming that you last that long against someone who has access to such a powerful source of energy. But there's one more thing that makes God Ki very unique, and it was revealed in Dragon Ball Super when Goku and Vegeta were training with Whis on Beerus' planet, and that's the level of ki control that God Ki has. You see, essentially, when you're using normal ki, the name of the game is to use energy attacks on your opponent, where you use certain amounts of energy to do certain amounts of things. Small amounts of energy are usually used to launch energy blast and energy volley, similar to what Vegeta does on a lot of his opponents, where he just hits them with a fury of energy bullets. Whereas the more powerful attacks like the Super Kamehameha are usually held and contain a lot of condensed ki and then release a lot of energy, but leaves the user tired afterwards because they literally just launched a lot of their ki into one concentrated attack. However, when it comes down to it, there's no real perfect way to measure how much ki is used for each attack, and it's only based off knowledge and assumption of how much ki you should use for an attack. For example, Goku can either choose to use a really strong Kamehameha using a large excess of ki, but it'll later tire him out, or he can use a weaker Kamehameha which won't do as much damage, but he still has plenty of energy reserves left to fight. God Ki essentially takes this and almost perfectionalizes the entire concept. You see, let's say if a character was launching an energy blast, well, essentially when a character launches an energy blast, they're probably not using that much ki, so the entire energy blast doesn't do a lot of damage, but just enough to damage the opponent slightly. They could put in more energy into their energy blast, which would do a lot more damage, but they'll probably be tired out. God Ki essentially perfects this in a way that uses just the right amount of energy so that they don't tire themselves out, but they still have a decent amount of damage behind that attack, and they still have energy left over to use several other attacks afterwards. Essentially, this is probably the most perfected the Z Warriors will ever get to using energy attacks that do significant amounts of damage but don't use up too much unnecessary energy. Whis points out that Goku and Vegeta, as well as all the other characters who use normal ki, have a bad habit of using too much excess ki, tiring themselves out in fights way too early, and thus won't be able to put up a fight against their opponent during the duration of the fight period. Or they'll use too little of ki, trying to preserve too much, but they don't end up using the full potential of what they have. Essentially, this was exploited even more when Goku and Vegeta had to train in a hyperbolic time chamber like dimension, where they were unable to move unless they were able to use the right amount of ki, meaning if they use too much, they won't move. If they use too little, they won't move. So with the ability to move way faster, be much stronger, be undetected by opponents, have a constant regain of healing factor, and be able to have perfect ki control, it's no question why God Ki is much stronger than, say, a Super Saiyan 3 or even a Super Saiyan 4 for that matter, if we want to count Dragon Ball GT, because the name of the game isn't just making a new transformation that's much more powerful but uses up way more ki, or even a transformation that doesn't use up too much ki but makes the user more powerful and stronger. It's still essentially a second fuel source for the characters to be able to use. If all else fails, Goku and Vegeta can even use their regular ki, saving out for when they need to use their God Ki for another duration of the fight. Now, there is a drawback to using God Ki, and it's the fact that using the God Ki itself takes up a lot of energy out of the user, and there's only so much that the body can sustain. This was exploited in the manga of Dragon Ball Super when Vegeta fought off against Hit. When Vegeta had transformed into Super Saiyan Blue, he ended up transforming into Super Saiyan Blue against Kaba, once in order to hit him one time, and then he transformed back, and then he transformed again into Super Saiyan Blue when he fought off against Hit the second time. Unfortunately, since he used Super Saiyan Blue once already, even though it was very briefly, Super Saiyan Blue works much like a light bulb, where a lot of the energy isn't in keeping the light on, whether it is turning off the light and then turning it right back on. You use up much more wattage on a light bulb when you turn it off and then right back on, rather than you just keeping it on the whole time, and that's where Vegeta fell short. So when using God Ki, it must be used sparingly, or else you're going to wind up having a bad time in most battles. Thankfully, in the manga, Vegeta and Goku have found ways to use God Ki more professionally to keep their energy in check in most battles. In the Black Goku or Zamasu arc, Vegeta goes back and forth between Super Saiyan Red God as well as Super Saiyan Blue God in order to keep a measurement of how much energy he uses, while he'll stay in red form in order to keep up with the speed of Goku Black and the fighting. But when it came down to energy attacks and using overall critical damage and major hits, Vegeta would transform into Super Saiyan Blue, essentially switching back and forth between those energies. This led to a lot of controversy in Dragon Ball Super as to asking why Goku would even need to transform into his golden form Super Saiyan techniques. And that's essentially so that he can use his regular ki and use it up before going into his God Ki, which does a lot more damage and has better results, but it can only be used sparingly. Another example of this was basically when the characters and Naruto would use regular chakra, but Naruto was a Jinchuriki, so he had accesses to 2 levels of chakra. His chakra, and then access to the Nine-Tailed Fox chakra, essentially meaning that Naruto had a second source of energy that he could use overall, which is the same concept that's done here in Dragon Ball Super. But with that said, I hope you all had a better, clear view of what Super Saiyan God is and Super Saiyan Blue and how they use God Ki to their advantage, and to see exactly why God Ki itself is much stronger than regular Ki. And you're probably asking yourselves this last question, well, Tyrone, if God Ki's so powerful, how come there's characters that can fight off against God characters like Gold and Frieza and Hit? Well, yeah, it is possible to have your regular ki and power be so high that you match up with the gods, but essentially they're still running off one ki source, and if Goku and Vegeta as well as other characters still have access to God Ki and can utilize it and perfect their own individual strengths high enough, then they can essentially outclass anything that a normal ki user can use. So essentially, the normal ki user can get as strong as a God Ki user, especially in this season of Dragon Ball Super. But essentially, unless they know how to use God Ki, they're going to find themselves in disadvantages like sensing Ki, being able to keep up with the fighters, or just having the endurance to outlast them, considering these characters have the ability to heal themselves in mid-battle. Also, one last thing I would like to note before I go is the fact that Goku has the ability to essentially dissipate certain amounts of energy by completely canceling it out altogether with his God Ki. This was seen once in Battle of Gods, and it was seen again in Dragon Ball Super when Beerus used his ultimate supernova-based attack against Goku, and Goku was essentially able to just deplete it out of existence. Now, it's unknown whether this is a technique exclusively to Goku, or is this just something that God Ki allows you to do, but Beerus even looked confused when this happened, so it may not be a God Ki thing, it could just be a thing essentially that Goku himself knows, or a technique that was picked up exclusively for the Super Saiyan God transformation. It wasn't really touched on much ever again, so we'll probably never know. But with that said, I hope you all were pretty much very informed by God Ki. This video was fun to make. I'll see you all then, everybody. Tyrone the God 3 out.